My name is Carolyn Moore, and I was born on August 6, 2001, at Beverly Hospital in Massachusetts. I'm a heterosexual, white, female-identifying person, and I grew up in the small, predominantly white, affluent town of Hamilton, Massachusetts. However, I would say my family belongs to the lower middle class in regards to wealth. I have ADHD and anxiety, which have both played a large role in forming my behavior, but I don't struggle with any physical disabilities, and I'm otherwise mentally able. Neither myself nor my immediate family associate with any particular religion, and our beliefs tend to be more agnostic. In my town, the cutoff date for elementary school is at the end of August, so as someone who was born in August, I lagged behind most of my peers in terms of physical growth, puberty, and certain milestones. For many children born just before the cutoff, this could be discouraging and possibly lead to differences in academic performance. We saw these differences in an example provided by Gladwell in Outliers, where students were placed into advanced math and reading groups at a young age. The problem with these groupings is the fact that they were majorly based on maturity, providing older students with an advantage. I, on the other hand, was given the tools to succeed as a student born in August. From a very young age, my family was adamant about my strong academic abilities. My dad always boasted about the fact that upon entering kindergarten, I was tested to ensure that I was ready to move forward, and the teachers said that I was too smart to stay in preschool any longer. My dad used to say that someday I would become president, and most people who met me called me mature. Because of these factors, I went through school with the belief and expectation of maturity, and therefore was placed into advanced groups despite my age. Over time, it became much more difficult to maintain a high level of academic performance. I was struggling to keep up in classes and focus on schoolwork. I wondered why other students didn't have as much difficulty as I did. By the end of high school, I had nearly given up entirely, because it seemed that no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't succeed. I stopped doing most of my assignments and almost failed my English class my senior year, which would have meant that I couldn't graduate. All my life I had been told how smart I was and how easily everything came to me, and I wasn't struggling to understand the concepts, so I couldn't understand why I wasn't able to do it. And neither could my parents, so they decided that it was due to laziness. I, on the other hand, convinced myself that there was something wrong with me and that I'd never be able to amount to much. The lottery of birth showed the impact that the situation we're born into has on determining our life paths, as well as how institutions can prevent mobility and limit opportunities for some. It wasn't until I graduated high school that I got diagnosed with ADHD, since I didn't display many of the stereotypical hyperactive tendencies. Looking back on it now, I realize how both culture and the education system prevented me from succeeding. My family strongly values grit, so the possibility of a mental disorder rather than laziness as the cause of my troubles was never considered. In school, my teachers liked me and allowed me to slide by most of the time. I didn't exactly deserve most of the grades I received, which goes to show how the education system often fails to provide the appropriate tools to students who struggle but haven't yet been labeled. Mainstream techniques don't work for me, but I was never taught otherwise, and no one made an effort to determine the cause or try a different approach. Having now watched many stories similar to my own, I see how common this theme is amongst schools. When I was in middle school, I was selected to attend a Women in Science and Engineering, or WISE, conference. I was one of 2 girls from my school who was chosen to go. In the United States, women aren't given the same encouragement to be involved in STEM as men are. The article, The Real Reason Girls Lag in Math, talked about the gap in women's involvement in STEM across different cultures. Cultural beliefs in America imply that women lack the natural mathematical ability that men have, and that math is for nerds, which discourages many young girls from investing time into it. Being selected to attend the event was an investment in my ability in STEM that many young girls in the United States don't receive, and while it may seem like a small investment, I later went on to take advanced math classes throughout middle school, then AP Chemistry, AP Statistics, AP Calculus, and multiple engineering courses in high school, all of which had a large imbalance in male and female students. I'm also now considering becoming an accountant once I graduate college, and I may have the opportunity to intern for an accounting firm in the near future. It's unlikely that I would have gone on to do any of these things had I not been invited to the conference. Up until that point, I had always enjoyed STEM, but I didn't have the faith that I could excel in any of those fields. Growing up in Hamilton while being from a lower middle-class family had its challenges. My parents didn't drive Land Rovers, we didn't own horses, and we couldn't afford to go on yearly trips to Italy. My parents are divorced, but my mom remarried right around the time I turned 4. I've always lived with her and my stepdad, as well as my 2 younger half-brothers. Much of my life has been spent learning how to function as a member of 2 conflicting cultures. At home, frugality was encouraged. My mom didn't finish college when she graduated high school and chose to get a degree when I entered middle school. I was responsible during that time for keeping my brothers in line, as my dad was forced to work much longer hours to cover our bills. I had an understanding that in order to experience any economic mobility, I would have to work extra hard at it. As we saw in the article, Learning to Strip, it's possible to become socialized into varying cultures through exposure to different agents of socialization, even if they conflict with your native culture's norms. At school, I witnessed lifestyles that were vastly different from my own. Over time, I learned that in order to succeed in that environment, I had to become accustomed to a different set of values. I worked multiple jobs in high school so that I could afford to live a more lavish lifestyle. To this day, I still struggle to replace consumerism with economic responsibility, since I was socialized to do both. I graduated high school in 2019 and made the last-minute decision to attend North Shore Community College for an associate's degree in human services. I was excited to begin a new chapter, hoping that it would make the possibility of moving up the class rankings seem like a reality. I was wrong, because as we learned in the Freakonomics podcast about the purpose of college, community colleges generally don't succeed at creating mobility for students. They lack the funding needed to provide resources and investment in the futures of their students. I experienced this at North Shore and was immediately discouraged by the fact that it felt like a continuation of high school with no opportunity to progress. I took 2 general education courses and 3 courses within my major, all 3 of which were taught by the same professor. He had very recently developed Bell's palsy, which made him difficult to understand at times, and he followed a very similar curriculum for each class. North Shore lacked the funding to provide its students with high-quality education or a sense of reassurance that it will create economic mobility. Unfortunately, these are institutional problems that impact many lower class students because of our culture's value of status over equity. Now, at Salem State, after having taken a couple of years off from school, I see progression as more of a reality. My professors are invested in my education, which has greatly increased my commitment. I'm currently working for a sand and gravel pit that's closely connected to the construction industry, and while I've developed a love for accounting, ultimately my goal is to become a project manager for a construction company. As a young woman, I face many discriminatory acts in the field, but I've been taught from an early age not to conform to gender roles. Similar to the young girls from the article Tiger Girls on the Soccer Field, my upbringing has led me in a particular direction. The girls from the article were instilled with the values of their own cultures and were involved in specific activities which gave them the characteristics needed to succeed in certain types of work. My father has always idolized non-conforming women in powerful positions. He's always encouraged me to disobey at times and go against gender norms. I began riding dirt bikes at a young age and was always involved in any home improvement projects. The characteristics he instilled in me have greatly influenced my desire to be involved in a heavily gendered institution such as in construction. Cultural factors play a huge role in shaping the decisions that we make. Thank you for listening to my story through the lens of the sociological imagination.